Have you ever thought about the preaching, the sermon? If you go to church on a weekend and there's a guy up in front, he's in a pulpit or maybe he's on a stage and he is preaching. He is preaching a sermon on God's Word. How did he learn how to do that? Well, today I'm going to have a conversation with one of the men who teach would-be pastors how to preach at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. Peter Nafzger is my guest today on this episode of the Reflection Podcast. Stay tuned at the end. I'll tell you how you can get a hold of Peter as well as find out more about St. Matthew. Reflection Podcast is a ministry of St. Matthew Lutheran Church here in Hawthorne Woods. But let's get at it on today's episode of the Reflection Podcast. In the pastor's office with me, Peter Nafzger. Thank you so much, my friend, for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So, I just to give a little background, I met you this last summer in Chicago. You were hosting and speaking at a preacher's workshop. And for my preacher friends and brothers who are watching this or listening to this, I encourage you, when these opportunities come around, go, and because you're going to learn something. I've been preaching for over 30 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed this workshop. I learned something new. I learned a lot of things new, actually, and it's really helped the preaching that I've been doing for the last 2 months. So thank you for that, by the way. And so let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today. Give us a little bit of a biography of Peter for us.
All right. Well, I grew up here in St. Louis. I teach right now at Concordia Seminary. I was actually born at the hospital across just a block or two away from the seminary. So
St. Mary's,
I
absolutely.
haven't gotten very far in life. But I grew up here in St. Louis. My dad was a church worker here in St. Louis, and I went to high school, went off to college at Concordia in Nebraska for 4 years. Studied behavioral science, played basketball, met my wife. It was a successful college experience. And then came to St. Louis for seminary studies. Spent a year in Germany studying abroad. Stuck around and got my PhD here from the seminary, and then took a call up into pastoral ministry up to Minnesota, Hugo, Minnesota, where I served for 9 years. Learned how to be a pastor among some wonderful people of God who are very patient with a new young pastor. Um, and then 9 years ago, I received and accepted a call to come back down here and teach at the seminary. I teach primarily homiletics, preaching courses, but I also teach some systematic theology, some pastoral ministry courses. And so I've transitioned frontline ministry for support staff.
Okay. Yeah, and training up another generation. Absolutely, so important. I'm going to be preaching in a chapel in a couple days at one of our Concordias, and that's exactly what I'm going to tell them all. Hey, I'm at the end of my career. I need you guys. Get out, get up,
Um,
and get up and take over for us, the next generation. I am curious, and I think this might be helpful for people watching or listening, how you found God's call, or how you found that God was calling you into the pastoral ministry growing up. I mean, yeah, your dad ordained and working in the church, but how did that come and transpire that you ended up at a Concordia?
yeah, it's a good question. I don't have like a lightning bolt experience where the Lord came to me on the road to Damascus or anything. But I had people telling me growing up that they thought I'd make a good pastor, which of course, as a young person, led me to want to choose anything else.
Uh-huh.
And then I went to school and I was thinking about going into medicine. I was thinking about being a teacher or a coach. And finally, I decided when I ran out of gen ed in college, if I really want to work with people and I really want to help people, I couldn't think of a better way to help people than to help them with things that are ultimate and eternal. And because I do like working with people, it made a lot of sense to pursue pastoral ministry. And so it's really been kind of at least when I was younger, it was a slow recognition that I had the interest, and others seemed to encourage me along that path. And then I found that, in fact, pastoral ministry, as you know, is not easy.
No.
Um, it's a challenge, and it took me a couple of years when people would ask me in the parish, "Do you like being a pastor?" The first couple of years, I couldn't say yes. I
Yep.
would say there's things I like about it, and there's things that are wonderful, but it's also really hard. But after 4 or 5 years, I really grew to love it, and sharing life with the people of God. That was really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I've asked this question. I've talked to several pastors as well as pastors who have transitioned into teaching, either at the seminary or in other places. And I've never gotten the lightning bolt out of the blue story for the call. It's always been somewhat gradual, and it's always somebody else that recognizes that. And I do want to talk to you about mentors a little bit later on in our conversation, so we'll get there. But so you transitioned from 9 years in parish ministry. I assume Hugo, Minnesota, rural Minnesota or suburbs?
Kind of bedroom community, kind of between the two almost of the Twin Cities.
Okay, so not certainly not Lake Wobegon.
Right, right.
So, but now you're in the bustling metropolis of St. Louis. Um, how there's a couple questions in there about the transition from pastoral ministry into the ivory tower of the seminary, but take us through that story of all of a sudden somebody came and contacted or knocked on your door and says, "Hey, you'd be a good professor." How did that come about?
Yeah, well, it did kind of come out of the blue. The provost here at Concordia Seminary called me up and asked if I was willing to talk about this position. It's actually interesting. The first time he called me, I was sitting in a makeshift office. I was the sole pastor of our congregation. We had just started a building project. We had torn out the walls in the sanctuary and in my office, and so I was in a makeshift office in the back of our sanctuary, and I was the only person on staff. And I told the provost at that time, I said, "There's no way I could leave here. They would kill me, and rightfully so. We just started this project." And he said, "Okay, that's fine." And then we had some conversation and hung up. And then it was probably about 11 months later where he called me up again and he said, "Is your building project done?" And I said, "Yeah, we're done." And he said, "Okay, can we talk?" And so I continued the conversation, and he mentioned to me the need for homiletics, preaching. And I was a little surprised by that because my doctoral work was in systematic theology. I had worked on the theology of Scripture, theology of the Word of God, but then we talked a little bit more, and turns out the Scriptures are very closely related to preaching. And
Funny
the
that how that works, isn't it?
And so, really, the thought process I had, I was not looking to leave the parish. I loved it. But the thought process I had was my prayer. I have two brothers, older brother, younger brother. And I've always, my prayer for my brothers, neither of them are in church work, was that they would have good pastors. And that they would have pastors who would make use of their strengths, that would be a good leader and teacher and guide for them. And when I had that call here to come teach, I actually thought about my brothers, and I thought if I can help some guys be a little bit more effective as preachers, as pastors, then I'd be serving them, and of course lots of other people along with them. And that finally led me to turn in a really beautiful, wonderful ministry that I loved. For a very different ministry here that I also love for very different reasons with very different challenges. Um, but that was kind of how I came to this place, and it is different. Seminary's got both wonderful things and challenging things, like every ministry. It was really particularly difficult for me when the first 6 months or so on Sunday mornings, because that's when you really live as a pastor, and not having that role with the congregation that was hard.
I can
Um,
only imagine. I've been in the parish for 30 years, and but I did come close to something like that in I think it was April of 2020. Uh, Easter Sunday morning rolled around, and we had pre-recorded the service because we were shut down, and it's
mm,
so Easter
yeah,
Sunday
right.
rolls around, and I did wake up at 3 a.m. because that's every Easter I've gotten up at 3 a.m. for 6 o'clock service, and I had nothing to do Easter Sunday morning because we pre-recorded it, and
Yeah.
I don't ever want to do that again. That was too weird. But I'm so glad that you did answer that call to because yes, preaching first and foremost. I think every pastor needs to be a good preacher, and I think every pastor is a good preacher, just in different ways, and continuously uh, learning and developing and strengthening that that gift that God has given. The preaching office is certainly one of the most important. And of course, like you said, the scriptures tied intricately into that. You can't have good preaching without knowing your scriptures and learning so well. And I was blessed also to have some wonderful, not only homiletics professors when I was at seminary, but also the systematic theology department. I had Jacob Preus the third, and I had uh, Norman Nagel. All of these teachings of the scriptures and the theology, and then I still use my homiletics professor's notes from Francis Rosso. Just an incredibly just so influential in my life. When I was down in St. Louis in August, I got to see him. 100 years old, and he's still going to chapel. I
Right.
love it. I absolutely loved it, and it was so great to see him. And so you're going to be that. You're going to be the Rev Rosso for somebody, probably several people, when you're 100 years old. So.
I look that good.
Yeah, definitely. He's probably still playing handball and still
Yeah,
could
maybe
probably
so.
beat me at handball. So, have you identified exactly why God had called you to do both parish work as well as seminary professor? What is it in you that God has gifted you? What are some of those skill sets, those talents that God has gifted you with? That, yeah, I get this now. I know why God called me here.
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy working with people and I enjoy helping people. There's something really beautiful about, and this is true about the congregation and teaching here at the seminary, that of course in the congregation you've got challenging members who are going through difficult things and who are frankly making ministry kind of hard for you. That's the case. And there are some students that are challenging and make teaching of a challenge. Uh, but I also get the opportunity to work with people who share your faith in Jesus and your love for the Lord and love for the world. Sometimes pastors talk about meetings. I remember when I was a student here, sometimes professors would talk about meetings as kind of the bane of the distance, church meetings, and sometimes they're really a pain. But I always really enjoyed the council meetings at my church up in Minnesota because as a sole pastor, I was the only one in the office most of the day. And on these council meetings, these people would come together out of their busy schedules, out of their lives, and they would come because they cared about the ministry of our church and they wanted to contribute. And having that partnership with members of the congregation, and then now I teach a lot of hom, and you've got a lot of homiletics, and the students in my homiletics class work really hard. I mean, as you mentioned, preaching is really important, and everybody wants to be a good preacher. So the students, I don't really have to work too hard to motivate the students to do the work because they realize, wow, this is harder than I thought it was going to be, and they receive feedback really well, even critical feedback. I tell students, I tell them everybody grades your sermons. I will be honest with you about what I give you and why. And I say, I also try, I'm going to try to be nice too. But I took this call so that I can help you guys become better preachers. And I got to tell you, one of the great joys of being a homiletics professor is I get the opportunity to have a lot of students for their first year homiletics class, and then also their fourth year when they come back for a homiletics elective. And I got to tell you, it is so gratifying to see the growth these guys experience over 3 or 4 years. And so that I don't know why the Lord called me into these things, but these are things that I really enjoy. And whether they be lay people or members of the in my classes, future pastors, it really is a delight to be in this together.
Yeah, it's amazing how I remember my first sermon in Hom 1 as a first year student, and I don't ever want to. I know that I have a videotape somewhere, and I don't ever want to go and watch that. But I think it's important for especially students that maybe some of your students will watch this. To realize the only way you get better is by doing it, and you just got to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, and you will get better just by sheer repetition of breaking down what it is that you do. So that's one of the things I wanted to because some students or future students will be watching this, what are some of the things that, yeah, I expected this is what this was going to be like, both in the parish or in the as a professor, or either one or both of them, things you expected, things that kind of took you by surprise in being this, or a parish pastor or a seminary professor.
Yeah, I read a really helpful article, and I can't remember what journal it was when I was a pastor, but I was a couple years in. I read an article by a pastor who talked about the interruptions in ministry, and he kind of waxed a little bit about how many interruptions there are. And you're trying to get ready for this, and someone comes in and they interrupt you for that, and somebody you're trying to accomplish this task, and you get interrupted with this call or with this email, and he was reflecting on the many interruptions and how frustrating that was, and how much of an obstacle that was to ministry, until he realized all of a sudden maybe the interruptions are the ministry. And I think about that often. I thought about that as a parish pastor. That was really helpful to me, not to let what I had in mind get in the way of what the Lord put in front of me. But it also has been significant for me as a professor because I live here on campus at Concordia Seminary. And so my wife and I really wanted to live in community with students. And lo and behold, students come by our house with some regularity, and it helps me to when that happens. Of course, I'm usually trying to work on something else, and but you realize, oh, here this is not just an interruption. This is also an opportunity, and that kind of mindset switch was really helpful to me because it helps me at least recognize that first of all, the Lord's the Lord all the time, and what He puts before us is what ultimately He puts before us. Our job is simply to take what He gives us and do the best we can under His grace, thank the Lord, to use the gifts He's given us in service to others.
Yeah, definitely. I caution other pastors that are maybe newish, or vicars and things like that. Yeah, ministry doesn't really happen in the office. It happens out there. You get your busy work done in the office, unless, of course, you're counseling somebody or meeting in the office. But yeah, the interruptions are the ministry. I love it. I think that's exactly right. And sometimes I think we get our heads down a little bit, and God has to, well, He has to forcibly, get our head up, look out, and remember that our congregations and the people who are listening to us are the Greeks who came to see Jesus in John 14. Sir, we wish to see Jesus. That's who we are called to do. That's what we're called to do. I'm glad that you emphasize that, and I hope that they hear this lesson. So 21st century church is certainly in a somewhat unique position. We've never been here before, obviously, just by sheer chronology, but it seems like certainly we're no less called to reflect God's light and love than the first century church was. What do you think is the for the church today, is what's peculiar about the mission of the church today than it has been in the past, do you think?
It's a great question because largely because today is, you're right, we've never been here before. We've never been anywhere before as the church progresses. But in these years, in these times, in these decades, we are certainly entering a new situation. It's been a slow move. I think of Charles Taylor's A Secular Age, where we've moved as a Western world away from an enchanted world, some of his language, where you see God and you see a reality that includes a spiritual world, and that we're creatures and that we're accountable. This whole mindset that filled the Western world for many, many centuries has slowly morphed to where we see ourselves purely as material, and we see ourselves kind of as on our own in a sense, socially. What I'm talking about, not Christians, but Christians live in this world that has the ground underneath has shifted, and what that means, I think, is that we can't just do business as usual, assuming that the foundational assumptions about life and humanity and everything is where it used to be. Now, that doesn't mean we in any way change what we believe, what we've been given by God in the scriptures, but how we communicate that and how that is embodied is inevitably going to look different. And of course, there's some similarities now between the contemporary church and the early church, the pre-Nicene church, where Christians were a little bit of an odd group. And I think there's an important place for the church to be a little odd again. But we got to be really careful because there's more than one way to be odd. There's a way to be odd that is alienating and that is disengaging and that is kind of almost running from society. And there's a way to be odd that is good for society and that is leaning into society. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with the way the church is the church today. And so I think that some of the biggest challenges that we face is how do we be faithful as the church in our actions with one another to a world that is skeptical, that questions, that has seen the church make some pretty bad mistakes in the past, and treat one another in a way that others see, wow, those are strange, different people, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's amazing how we have really kind of, I guess, shot ourselves in the foot a little bit of how we treat each other in the church is almost secular, and still but we have to present this face to the world that, yeah, we're sinners just like you, and we're hypocrites just like you, just like anybody else. But we have the gospel message. We're forgiven, and we want to share that with you. I don't know what it is about, especially our tribe of Christianity, Lutheranism. We love our history, and rightly so, but we tend to love it so much that we wanted to just want to keep doing the way we have been doing. You know, we've never done it that way before. It scares us a little bit, and yeah, the church is a living organism. It's living, it's breathing. What did Peter call it? The living stones, right? And so we need to let the church live, let the church breathe, let the Holy Spirit really do His thing, and get out of the way and say, "Hey," like Samuel. I just read First Samuel, where Eli tells the young Samuel, when you hear the voice, say, "Yep, here I am." I'm listening, and that's the way I think we need to get back at that today. So you were in the parish, now you're at the seminary. What would you tell the parishes today? How can they raise up another generation of pastors and leaders to lead the church, both lay people as well as clergy? What is the congregations, the church on the ground, the boots on the ground? What can they do?
I actually think it's a little bit related to what we were just talking about in terms of the church of the 21st century. I think people are asking very fundamental, uh, deep questions about what is a human being? What meaning is there in life? These things that maybe the church didn't have to address for many centuries. Uh, if the church and its pastors are able to address those basic foundational realities in a way that helps people old and young see what it really means to be a human creature and what God has designed for His creation, I think that's touching on those deep realities and being explicit about that is one of the church's highest priorities for today. And of course, that means we're going to do so in line with our history and our traditions. But those histories and traditions haven't had to really wrestle with these foundational questions in a while. And so getting to the basic truths and explaining why we do what we do, how we do what we do, that's pretty important. I also think it's a little related to what we said a minute ago about, sometimes it's hard to be church well. We kind of mimic society. And I've been asking this question of people recently, so I'll give you a quiz here, Ed, and see if you can get the right answer. Do you know what the word of the year was according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary in 2024? Every year they have a word of the year that they put out. And do you know what that word is for 2024?
So that was last year.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. I really don't. I was thinking of guessing. It could be something like Riz or something. What the kids are saying these days. But no, I don't know what is it.
So the word of the year, and I'm not sure exactly how they choose this. It's partially Google searches and that kind of stuff, I think. But the word was polarization.
Oh, well, now it makes sense, right?
And the article that I read about it noted that one thing that everyone agrees with is that we're polarized.
Yeah.
And they describe polarization as, on most issues, there's a spectrum of positions. And polarization is what happens when the middle vanishes and all you've got is extremes. And I think you see this in society, with harder and harder time finding middle ground. And unfortunately, the church mimics society in this respect in a really unhealthy way. And so I actually think one of the ways to raise up new leaders, new church workers, is for the church led by pastors to recover that middle place where we are putting the best construction on things, even with people we disagree with, where we are collaborating with people genuinely, not just giving lip service and silencing people, those we disagree, the people that we disagree with, but coming together, and being as pastors and as other professional church workers, a brotherhood of servants of the word that can get along even when we don't agree with all of our preferences on everything. I think that's really important for our life together and for raising up the next generation of leaders.
I just taught a new member class for people that want to join our congregation, and we take them through these lessons of this is what the Bible is, this is what Lutheranism is, and we cover the Ten Commandments. And that eighth commandment in our tradition is do not bear false witness. Luther's explanation to that is spot on for the 21st century. You know, put the best construction, like you said. You know, explain everything in the best possible way, assume that they mean well, no matter
Mhm.
what they say, other people say. I think that there's the middle right there. Is like not everybody hates everybody. I think it's just a matter of maybe we just don't understand. So let's seek understanding instead, right?
And that's the seeking understanding, the seeking listening, the need to learn how to listen again, to people. We live in such an echo chamber world where it's possible for all of us to surround ourselves with voices that are just our own. And the algorithms even feed that. And so we actually have to work at interacting with one another and living as Christians together. And I think we can do that under the power of the Spirit.
It was something that you had shared with us at this preaching workshop in Chicago this last summer in 2025 that I incorporated into one of my Bible studies is to actually go through the texts that we think we're going to be preaching on in a couple weeks and ask them, so what do you hear here? What do you see in here? What are some questions that you might have? What are some of the things that you don't understand? What would you like to know more about whatever this text is talking about? And I dutifully, basically, I'm leading that Bible study, but I'm jotting down their notes, and then I give it to either my associate who's preaching that on that text, or I will, and to listen to what they're saying, so that I can preach to what they're asking instead of I think you need to know this. It's more along the lines of we're asking these questions, and maybe I can come up with some kind of answer. And so, thank you for doing that, by the way. That whole conversation that we're having, and I think it's important.
Yeah, and that's when I think about preaching, one of the hardest things about preaching, I think, is speaking a word on target to the people who are gathered to listen. Which is why. So I was just at a pastor's conference this last week, and I heard some great preaching from the district president and from a couple of the pastors in the district to their brother pastors. And I thought to myself, why was their preaching so on target here? And I thought, well, it's because they're in conversation with one another and they know what's going on. And the district president knows how his pastors are struggling and the joys they're experiencing. And so he can speak a clear and faithful word that's on target. I don't question that any of our preaching in our circles is faithful and orthodox and biblical. But sometimes I think where we fall short is we're missing where exactly our hearers are. And I think the only way to get to that is to spend more time listening to them, and hearing from them.
I agree. It. I'm going to be. like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be preaching at one of our Concordias for their chapel, and I'm going to tell them, 40 years ago, I was sitting where you're sitting, and I was judging the guy preaching because, I was a pre-sem student. That's what you do. But it's still, I want to listen to what they're saying. I want to listen to what they're asking. Same thing with the people in my parish. It's so important, no matter where you are. You could be preaching in chapel at the seminary. We went to chapel every day that we were in St. Louis. Was there for orientation for an intern, and to hear those messages from professors who they're not necessarily in the parish anymore, but they have a parish. They just have a seminary community is what their parish is, and they obviously they're listening to them, and their preaching was spot on. It was right there because that's exactly what we're talking about. And it's interesting. I'd like to get your take on it too, of the world today, especially in the last couple weeks as we record this. It's the middle of October 2025. Um, and so a month ago, there was this very public murder of outspoken activist who was not, Charlie Kirk was not shy about sharing his Christian faith either. And there seems to have been a response to that, of almost like not his generation, but the one after him. So it would be maybe the Gen Z, because I think he was a millennial. But they seem to be saying, you know what? I'm not going to be afraid to talk anymore. And we're hearing more and more people talk about Jesus and ask questions about Jesus. Do you see that as well, or maybe I'm just looking in a different place?
No, I think it's my access to this is through my children and through students here. So I've got children who are 20, 18, 17, and 14. She'll be 15 in a couple weeks. And so I see the young people through their eyes. They went to public school, public high school. The two older ones are at one of our Concordias, and they're having a great experience. And it's been interesting to see their engagement, especially in high school, their engagement with classmates who are not Christians. And they've actually had a kind of, I think, a good, not always easy experience in a public school. But they found that they were able to, and more confident probably in speaking up and sharing their faith, because there's an atmosphere of people speaking with conviction today. Now, if we can speak with conviction without resorting to violence, of course, or without resorting to verbal or personal attacks on reputation, then you can actually maybe get somewhere. And so when I talk with my son, for instance, who's a junior in high school, and he shares with me conversations he has with classmates who aren't Christian, he finds an openness to be heard, and to engage in conversation. And that I think that's happening on little ways. But I think that's not the kind of stuff that gets a lot of attention, big picture. Except, Charlie Kirk was. I didn't really know much about the guy, but from what I understand, he was really interested in talking, um, and even talking with people that you disagree with. And that whole notion of polarization coming together in the middle is really hard in our culture, and it's got to be. But I think that's where we got to go.
Yeah, he was. In fact, I've watched more of his videos now since that happened, just because I need to know who this guy is. And what I heard was, if you disagreed with him, he put you at the front of the line to talk. He wanted to have that conversation, and I think that's exactly what the church needs to do. We can't. I know we call them sanctuaries, so they're places of refuge where we worship, but they're also open doors. And there has to be a place, I think, where people can come and as one preacher that I listen to on a regular basis, they metaphorically are they're peeking over the fence to see what this whole Christian thing is about, and not be afraid that there are people in front of us they don't believe what we believe. They don't know what they believe, maybe, or they don't have this understanding of Jesus that's the same as ours, and to not be afraid of that, and to bring it into our preaching as well.
Yeah, I was influenced by a book I read a number of years ago. I think it came out in 2011, called "You Lost Me" by David Kinnaman. And David Kinnaman is the president, I believe, still is, of the Barna Group, who does extensive research throughout the country from a Christian perspective. And they had conducted thousands and thousands of interviews of people who had left the church. And the overwhelming message that these people wanted to give to the church was that you lost me. Now, whether or not that's actually the case, that could be disputed. But these people who had left the church felt like the church had left them or had let them down. And then he summarized in six categories of things they said, well, you lost me by being like this. And one of the six was, he said, the church has appeared to people who have left as doubtless, as a place where questions and doubts are not welcome. And I mean, you're a pastor, you know how this goes. People are going through a really hard time as members of your congregation, and oftentimes they detach themselves from the church when they're going through a hard time, instead of being the place where they can come and bring their struggles and bring their challenges and bring their doubts. And so I would say, as a pastor in my adult Bible class, if you guys have doubts about what we believe, you have doubts about God, bring them here and let's discuss them here. I don't want to leave you in your doubts. But I want to have this be a place where those questions are welcome and have that kind of atmosphere. If we believe, if what we believe is true, and I think it is, then we should be as rigorous as anyone else in fielding questions and challenges, and then sort through the scriptures to figure out how do we respond faithfully.
And that's the challenge for us too, is if we're going to be able to do that and we see the importance of doing that, we're going to have to know what we know. And that can be a challenge. How much effort do I need to put into this? Well, yeah, you do. Because you need to know what you know, and because it is important, like you said, to bring those doubts, let them come in. It's interesting. I'm going to be finding this book because I just had a meeting of we call them deacons, but they're the board of elders in most congregations. And one of our goals is to look at, why did people leave the church, or why have they become inactive members of the church? And it sounds like this is exactly what we need to know, to
Well,
ask those questions.
it is, and I can't not be on this podcast without sharing some information that I've recently learned that is really troubling, that we need to address head on, and it has to do with losing members, especially losing young people. So I teach a course here at the seminary on confirmation and Christian formation. We look at the history of confirmation, how we've raised up young people in the past, what the challenges are today, how do we raise up young people going forward, and our youth ministry office for the LCMS has done some studies recently on retention. And their studies show that we confirm between 50 and 60% of the people we baptize. Okay. These are kids who get baptized as infants. They're confirmed 13, 14 years later. After confirmation, we retain a third of the kids who are confirmed by the time they leave high school. You do a little math and you find out that we're keeping about 1.7 of every 10 kids we baptize in the Missouri Synod are still in our church 18 years later. And that is, first of all, to my mind, a crisis
Mhm.
of a inability to raise up kids in the faith. And I think that requires a lot of attention and thinking about, well, why are these people leaving? Where are they going? What could we do better? How could we build on the faithful Christian education and formation that we've done in the past? But how can we build on that and refine it for a very different context? And that's something that we need to all work on together, I think.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I assume that I'm going to be able to find that information from our youth ministry office, and look for that, because you're right. I have I've been in this current parish 14 years, so I have a student in my third year, so she'll be confirmed in the spring. And I hadn't realized it, that I've been there that long. I baptized her. And that made me feel really, really old first. But you're right. It's like, where are all the kids? We baptize maybe 30, 40 kids a year here. And so where are they? I only have 15 kids in confirmation class that of those 30 that I baptized, that not just me, but I was in a team ministry all along as well. Where are they? And that is definitely something we're going to have to address. You're right, it's a crisis. And it's not, I mean, we're talking about the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod because that's what we know, but I don't think it's probably unique to us.
It does. It holds those that data holds for, and You Lost Me gives you that kind of data. There's a book that our youth ministry, Mark Kiesling and Juliana Schultz together wrote. It's from CPH, just published a year or two ago, and it's Seven Habits of um, Healthy Youth Ministry Congregations. It's something like that. It's the seven habits. I'm sure you'll find it easily
I
from
will.
CPH. But they give a lot of this data, and what's really helpful about that book is it then identifies seven things that congregations and leaders can say, how are we doing at this, and then make some adjustments to try to help the young people deepen their faith.
Well, I hope you're teaching that at the seminary as well. Train up these guys to be able to lead that in the parishes. Yeah. So very important. I want to get a little bit personal with you into your background about mentors. I mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation. Who were some of those guys? The reason I asked this question simply is that sometimes we don't recognize who our mentors are when we're being formed, when they're really mentoring us, and we only realize afterwards. So I like people to understand they might have a mentor in their life right now they don't recognize. Who was that or those people for you?
When I think about mentors, especially when I was young, middle school and high school, particularly, I mean, that's when kids are kind of starting to look outside the home to other adult figures to guide them. The ones I think who are most significant in my life were my teachers. I think there's certainly a need for more pastors. We know that in the church body. There's also an incredible need for more teachers, and the impact that teachers have on young people day in, day out. I think about my seventh and eighth grade teachers, Mr. Brockman, Mr. Taylor in high school. These men who were humbly serving greasy and grimy middle school and high school kids and holding them accountable and showing them love and concern. I think it was some of my Lutheran school teachers who really made an impact on my life and shaped me at a time and a place when I was most in need of figures outside my home. I mean, my mom and dad, of course, are central mentors, but not. I mean, just the facts are too that not a lot of kids have the same kind of upbringing and the
Mhm.
home life that some of us were very privileged to enjoy as kids. And so having mentors, commissioned ministers, DCEs can do a lot of really important work in congregations. As much as we need pastors, we also need those commissioned ministers who do such important work.
Agreed, 100%. Not just raising up pastors, but also the other professional, what we coined that professional church workers. You're right, the directors of Christian education, youth ministers,
Mhm.
deaconesses, because I'm an intern for an online deaconess studies intern, so I'm a mentor for her. So yeah, that's so very, very important. All right, so kind of wrapping this up, I have my billboard question I like to ask all my guests. I'm going to give you a billboard, one of those new ones that you can change the sign. It's an electronic billboard, but so millions, maybe billions of people see it every single day, but only for about 10 seconds. So you got to put something quick on this board, something short. What do you want somebody that you only got their attention for 10 seconds? What's your message to them?
Well, it's got to be Jesus if I got 10 seconds. It's all Jesus and all the things Jesus said. Uh, I think the thing that he said that's most near and dear to my heart is what he said in John 10:10, and that is, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. Jesus has come to bring life to a creation that is so racked with death and division and destruction. and the life that is a communal life, that is life with Him, a life with one another. I don't know how you fit all that on a billboard, uh, but
I'll figure
that's
it out.
behind John 10:10. Jesus has
Sure.
come to bring life with others. It's not just an individual thing.
Sure. Yeah, life together, right?
Yeah,
Life
right.
together. So we talked a little bit about books. I've got two now that I'm going to get on my bookshelf. I'm going to order those right away. We talked about CPH. For those of you who aren't Lutherans, that's Concordia Publishing House. There will be links in the show notes to them, but that's what we tend to throw a lot of alphabet around as Lutherans. What are some of the books though that you would give as a gift? You got the holidays coming up. What do you put under the tree for somebody you love?
That's a good question. Of course, it depends on who the person is.
Hmm.
And I'll just share with you a couple that I recommend to people for various reasons. I'd like to recommend for people who are interested in understanding Lutheran theology a little bit better. I really appreciate the book that a couple of my colleagues wrote, Robert Kolb and Chuck Arand, uh, called The Genius of Luther's Theology, a Wittenberg way of thinking for the 21st century. I shared that with a fellow pastor. He's a Baptist pastor up in Minnesota, but I gave him that book at one point because I thought it's a nice way to capture some of the fundamental basic realities that Luther offered to the church from the scriptures that are really helpful, not just in the 16th century, but also today. If I were one of the books I recommend most to homiletics students is you mentioned one of your professors a little while ago, Jacob Preus the third. He wrote a book called Just Words, and the subtitle is Understanding the Fullness of the Gospel. And what he does is he does a really nice job bringing together from the scriptures the many different metaphors that the biblical authors use to help us understand the gospel, metaphors of healing, of adoption, of reconciliation, of declaration of innocence. The gospel is, as I tell students, the gospel is like this jewel that you turn and it's got so many different angles shooting out of it. And to understand the fullness of the gospel, what that means for us, and then to be equipped to share that with others, wherever they may be. And that's a book that I really, really have appreciated. And then I'll mention one other that I found very stimulating for me. I didn't necessarily agree with absolutely everything in it, but it was a really helpful reflection on what it means to be a Christian. The book is called Loving Jesus by Mark Allan Powell. And he has this way of walking through kind of the basis of the Christian faith that this was a great book for mature Christians in my congregation where we would read a chapter at a time and just reflect on. He's basically communicating some of the foundational Christian Lutheran truths, but from a different angle and with a different perspective. And I found it very stimulating. My wife would lead a group of ladies and study on like a book group study on this book, and we found it very very stimulating. So that's one that I have given that book to people because I just really enjoy it. And so there's a couple of books for you.
Great. I will put the links in there for people to find those and maybe expand either their Kindle library or like I do. You can see behind me over here. That's just one of the 17 bookshelves in my office. So, so as I last question, what is the one question I didn't ask that you would have wanted me to ask?
Uh, I guess I would have appreciated maybe you asking about my hobbies.
Okay. So, all right. Consider it asked. What's your hobbies?
Okay. So I coach the basketball team here at the seminary. I enjoy
Ah,
that. I enjoy German board games, strategy games with my family and with friends. But a recent hobby that I've picked up that I really enjoy is rock climbing.
oh
Uh,
yeah.
got a good friend who during COVID had kind of been pushing me to try rock climbing with him. And when all of our kids' youth sports were canceled in COVID, we went climbing with him and his family and joined a rock climbing gym as a result because we had a blast. It was great exercise. It was challenging mentally. But what we really love about it, we've kind of pursued even further. We go outdoor climbing now, and we put the stuff in the wall and climb up. And um, what I really enjoy about it, besides the fact that it takes you out into beautiful places of creation I never would have seen, is that it's incredibly communal. You really are caring for one another by having someone belay you, that is kind of be at the other end of the rope to catch you when you fall. And inevitably, at times we fall because we're climbing and it's hard. And that dependence on one another, and the time in creation, and the exercise that it provides, I really have grown to enjoy rock climbing.
Excellent.
So
Have you ever heard the name Craig DiMartino? Okay,
actually,
so you're going to have to look up this guy. It's just like it sounds, D. Martino. Craig is his first name. Um, I'm working the process of getting him on the podcast. I have known Craig for 25 years and have gone rock climbing. He is the first handicap person to climb El Capitan in Yosemite. He lost
okay,
a leg falling. In a rock climbing accident, and now he works with people who are missing limbs and does rock climbing and stuff. So you got to look up Craig DiMartino. He's an
yeah,
incredible story, faithful Christian man, and out of Colorado. So. And when I get him on the podcast, I'll make sure I shoot you guys links to because his story is just incredible, and I love rock. I would have never rock climbed until I saw his story, and then he actually came out to California when I was there a couple of years ago as a pastor, and we went climbing in Malibu Creek State Park, and also in Wonderland of Rocks out at Joshua Tree.
oh
It was
wow,
just amazing. Yeah, you're right. You never would see these places if you weren't going there to climb the rocks. Yeah,
right,
they're off the beaten path. So.
right.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I know that you're going to inspire somebody to reflect God's light and love in this dark world. Thank you so much, my friend.
My pleasure. It's nice to be with you.
If you'd like to know more about Dr. Peter Nafzger, we'll have links in the show notes for you to Concordia Seminary, where he is a professor of homiletics. As we said, he teaches pastors, or at least future pastors, how to craft a sermon and how to present a sermon, to preach. He also does teach current pastors as well. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, that I first met him at a preaching workshop in Chicago that he came up for, and it was an incredible experience. It helped me sort of not reevaluate, but to just give me some ideas on how to incorporate things into my sermons and making my sermons, hopefully anyway, more relevant and more inspiring to other people. Always getting back to the Word of God. So we'll also have links to the books that he mentioned, and that will be in the show notes as well. Reflection is a ministry of St. Matthew Lutheran Church in Hawthorne Woods, Illinois, where I am pastor. And if you'd like to know more about St. Matthew, you can go to our website, which is stmats.net or stmatts.net. And we'd love to have you visit us. If you'd like to plan a visit, you're in the northeast part of Illinois. We are just outside of Chicago, about an hour's drive from downtown and about a half-hour drive from O'Hare Airport. If you happen to be in the area, we would love to have you come out for worship on the weekends or some of our Bible studies during the week as well. All of our worship services and many of our Bible studies are also streamed live on YouTube and Facebook, and then because of that, they are on demand. You can catch them anytime. You can go to our website, and then you'll find the links to our YouTube channel. And if you're on Facebook, just look for St. Matthew Hawthorne Woods. So that wraps up today's episode. I'm so thankful that you joined me today. I pray that God will richly bless you, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Reflection Podcast.